Hello and welcome to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. In this episode, I am joined by the fantastic Rimla Akhtar, and Rimla is an incredible speaker. She's an amazing advisor and she works a lot in the sporting world, but that's not where she started. And I think Rimla's experience is a great one for us to think about. Where we start in our career isn't always where we end up. And how when we focus on spending some time and volunteering in our passion areas and finding space to do that within our lives, it can actually become something that becomes our career, even when that's not expected. I think there's something great in Rimla's thinking around this idea that to trust the process, that you're going through things for a reason, even when things are tough, and that there's always something to be learned from everything that you're going through. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I know I did. I took a lot from it, and I will come back at the end and think about what are the actions I'm going to take from it. Hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the WorkJoy Jam. This week, I am joined by Rimla, who is a fantastic person with such great insight into the world of work and sport and volunteering. And I'm really, really excited to have this conversation. So before we get going with all my questions, I would love, Rimla, to hand over to you and for you to introduce yourself and tell our audience a bit about your story and what got you to where you are today.
Hi Beth, thanks for having me on, and hi everyone. Sure, just to tell you about where I am right now. I work in the sports industry as I have a portfolio of sort of non-executive roles, but also sort of away from that, I work quite a lot on governance and leadership and what good governance and good leadership can look like for our industry, what it should look like, and trying to drive some of those standards across the industry. So that can be anything from a diversity and inclusion angle to a general sort of governance angle, and kind of the people that you're getting around the table and how you put a group together really to govern your organisation. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing now. I absolutely love sports and have done from a young age, so it was no surprise really that I ended up doing what I'm doing today. Although probably not planned, I would say. So I started off after studying science at university. I went off to PwC, worked in finance, got my chartered accountancy qualification, and then somehow ended up back in sport because it does drag you back in. That's what your passions do. So yeah, I've been in the space probably for the last, I would say, in a sort of job role focused rather than a voluntary capacity. I've been in this space for about the last 5 to 6 years, since I joined first the FA Council, so Football Associations Council, back in 2014, and then sort of more recently took on roles as non-executive director at Sports Ground Safety Authority, and then more recently last year at Rugby League, the RFL, which has been really amazing to join. So I've, as you can tell, hands in a few different pots, but all things that come back to sport and governance and leadership. So that's what I do. In terms of, I guess, what my philosophy is, and how I really focus in terms of my work and what I choose to do for work, it comes back to the idea of intentions and purpose. So those sort of two things. The first thing is, first and foremost, the idea of paying attention to your intention. And then whatever flows from that is bound to be good. So obviously, as a person of faith, I draw a lot of my inspiration and my focus from my faith. And we have a saying to have, tawakkul is the Arabic word, but what it effectively means, if you translated it, the best word is probably trust. So to trust in God and to trust in what's going to happen. So you tie the camel, then you leave the outcome in God's hands. So that they're the best of hands. So that's kind of from my faith. And then there's the idea of, all of your actions start with the intention. So for me, my philosophy comes from that. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Other people have said it as well. Why? What's the why part? And what's your reason? What's your purpose? And I think it quite links quite well to another concept that is out there that I came across a few years back, and it's I think I'm pronouncing this properly. It's the Japanese word ikigai.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a reason for being, or a reason for existing, I guess, and how you are. And that's really, I guess, in summary, that when I saw the diagram and I sort of saw that concept, I thought that's really where I'm at, in terms of my work and my life. Everything that I do is kind of in that center of that Venn diagram, and I'm just really privileged to be doing what I'm doing, I guess.
Great. And it's really interesting that, and maybe we'll go back in time a little bit. Obviously, you had a career in the corporate world at PwC, chartered accountancy, that kind of world. And one of the things you said then, I'm really interested in that kind of the sport kind of draws you back in and drew you back into your passion. How did you first really get involved into sport? And then how have you managed to move away from being in the corporate world to being an advisor, to being a non-executive director, and how did you balance that stuff with work and making it happen?
Yeah, so as I said earlier on, the idea of trust, right? So trust the process. If that's how if you're somebody that isn't of faith, then you can always think about things like trust the process, right? And you're going through things for a reason, and there's always something to learn from it. And I feel like my life's been really a story in that. So growing up, I got into sports as a young girl because my mum was sports president back at school every year, and her mum was a basketball player, and her father was a hockey player. Her grandfather, it's in the blood.
Yeah,
You could
it's in your
say.
DNA, isn't it? Sport, it's
Exactly.
right there.
And my brothers, two older brothers as well, the only girl, it was bound to happen. I'd get left out otherwise. So it was, that's how I really got into sport, honestly. Playing with my brothers in the back garden, or in the grounds in front of our home, or whatever. And it's always been a huge part of me, because I grew up, in the reality of the situation is I grew up in a racist kind of environment, racist Britain in the 80s and 90s, and then in an Islamophobic environment, sort of coming into the late 90s into the 2000s. I started to feel that my faith was a reason for hatred coming my way, and sport was this space where I felt safe. I felt like nobody cared about my identity, the fact that I'm a girl, or an Asian girl, or a Muslim girl. It was just how well I played on the pitch, or whatever the field of play might have been. And I happened to be good. I happened to be good at a few different sports, and that really helped me to find myself. And so I think I clung on to sport for dear life growing up,
Yeah.
because of that sense of I'm accepted. I'm accepted in this space. And that really, I carried with me my whole life. So whether I went to PwC, or whether I was at a university, whether I was focused on my studies, it gave me a way to be ambitious. It gave me a way to be confident. It helped me to really focus on what my goals were, because that's what sport does for you. But growing up, women, full stop, but women like me, certainly, could not have considered a full-time career in sport. And so I didn't really ever think that I could be in the sports space. I didn't think I could be a player, an athlete, and I certainly didn't think about administration side of things that I'm doing now. But yeah, so at PwC, when I joined PwC after graduating, I also became chair of an organisation called the Muslim Women's Sport Foundation, and that was sort of me being dragged back into sport after I'd sort of said, that. I'm hanging up my boots, as it were, because I just played for the British Muslim Women's Futsal team, captained them, and I was like, okay, I'm focused on my career now. It's as if I compartmentalized and said, right now it's time to focus on the real life, right? The real, the work stuff in the city. And I sort of, carried on playing sports for fun, but it was less competitive, and ended up being asked to lead the organisation after I put together a grassroots strategy from them. And that's really where the journey on the sports side started voluntarily. I still look back at it and think I was effectively doing two jobs, and anyone that knows the city life in PwC knows how crazy that is. So I
Yeah.
do look back at it and think, how the heck did I do that? But I did, and you know, there came a time back in sort of 2012, 2013 where I'd taken a sabbatical from PwC, and just some time for myself, and I had to think about, what is it that I want to do? Do I want to go back to the city life, or do I want to make all this sports stuff that I do voluntarily my work? Um, and I chose the latter, and to be honest, Beth, I'm so happy I did, and I haven't looked back since.
Brilliant. And so interestingly, and let's talk about this for a minute, because I think there's a lot of joy to be found in volunteering.
Mm.
Obviously, there's also a lot of work involved in volunteering. So, but from WorkJoy, we define work as anything from, the job that you're paid for, to volunteering, to the annoying adulting stuff that you have to do in the household, or that you have to do to kind of, live your life as you can. So, volunteering is definitely work, and it sometimes comes alongside your other work. How did the volunteering experience help you and kind of give you some joy, and help you define what you wanted to do in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the volunteering work, like you say, it is work, and it takes up probably more of your energy because you tend to volunteer for causes or for organisations that you really feel passionate about, or you feel close to in some way, whether that's through a connection, a friend or a family member's asked you to get involved, or whether it's something that you really believe in. And I think that takes a lot of emotional toll, not just physical toll in terms of the amount of energy that's expended is probably more because there's so much more emotional kind of connection to what it is you're
Mm,
doing. But it comes back to, again, for me, about your intention. So it's being really self aware, yes, about what you can possibly do, potentially do, and how much energy you can give, not just, your work life in terms of what you can get paid for, but also your work life in terms of what the world needs and what you love and what you're good at. So um, it's for me, it comes back to that point that I was saying earlier on about your intention, and it all begins from there, because the desire or the need to control something can be really destructive, and it can actually remove all joy. But if you
mm.
can look at what it is you want to do as well as what you can do, and you can enjoy the journey, when it does get rough, when it gets tough, when those hours are really, you're clocking them in at high levels, your intention, if it's sincere, it will get you through. And whilst I said sort of jokingly earlier on, I don't know how I made it through. I think what helped me make it through was the fact that I had um, everything in that sort of model of Ikigai. I had everything other than I'm being paid for it. And to me, that, as I was saying, everything happens for a reason. It was all my personal experiences of sport. It was all my business experience of having studied sort of management and chartered accountancy. And it was also me seeing the power of sport and that the world needs sport, kind of coming together into this space of, this really means something. This means something. It gives me a purpose. It's a purpose that I kind of knew was there without really knowing it was there subconsciously, and it came to the surface when, the opportunity to be in sports administration and lead a charity, like the Muslim Women's Sport Foundation, actually came up. That was then my opportunity to bring all of these things together. Um, so I do think that it's, all of those things rolled in one. It's that lesson again once more around intention and what's your purpose. Why are you doing this?
Yeah. And taking that opportunity. So sometimes we see things out there that might link with our purpose, that actually intention wise, like totally would fulfill us or give us the things that we're really looking for. But sometimes we don't take that opportunity, or we think
Mm.
actually we can't do that, or we can't make it happen. And obviously you were in that full-time, well, more than full-time, full speed job, but were able to
Yeah.
see the long-term opportunity in doing something that really did link with your deeper purpose.
Mm. Yeah, and I think, there's one thing that I look back at. There was that time I had the sabbatical, right? So I decided to take some time away from PwC, away from work, I had personal reasons for doing that as well. I'm now a carer as well, so there were reasons for me to step away and sort of take some time for me as well, and for the person that I care for. Um, but actually, that moment, that time to myself, and I'm quite a reflective person, and I'd like to think quite self-aware as well. And I think that played a huge role in terms um, of that. And for me, that time gave me the opportunity to realize that whilst having joy in your work is hugely important, and having work is hugely important, obviously,
Mm.
not making work your life or how you define yourself. Um, I think that's really important, and I got that during that time. It doesn't mean that you're not interested. It doesn't mean that you're not getting joy from your work. It doesn't mean anything like that. It means that you have some perspective,
Yeah.
and you can ask yourself, who am I, and who am I if I'm not doing the work that I'm doing? So I think that time actually gave me that space to do that and think about what it is I want to do. And I remember I had a mentor there who's ex PwC, as he's a ex partner there, who I'd just started seeing for mentoring. And when I told him I'd decided to fully give up PwC, sabbatical turned into I've now quit, and I'm just going to focus on my volunteering work. um, I was told I was ruining my career. And he wasn't the only one. Other people thought I was being crazy. I'll stop with this, greater purpose stuff. You've got to make your money, and you'll do that in the city. You won't do that doing this other stuff. Um, I think that space allowed me to have that courage in my own conviction, and I know myself. Nobody knows you better than you know yourself. And so I had to find that perspective, and I then took that perspective, and I really questioned what it is I want to do, and how do I make sure that I don't define myself by what I do. I define myself by who I am, first and foremost. So it's a real process, and there will be people who will potentially try and take you off track, but it's for you to know yourself first and foremost, to know whether you can go down a certain pathway and go down it quite steadfastly.
And really commit to it.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's
Yeah.
I just you've really reminded me when you were saying that, which is a quote from a book by Glennon Doyle called Untamed, which is a favourite of mine recently. And it says, "This life is mine alone, so I have stopped asking people for directions to places they've never been."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
right, and that for me is a really great quote. And your whole story there about people doubting you or saying you're going to ruin something, but that's in their mind versus in your own journey. And it must have
Yeah.
been quite hard at that time to make that decision, because it is a decision out of a well trodden path of, this is what you
Mhm.
do, this is the process, this is how you progress, this is your career in a nice box, this is the money angle. That must have been quite hard to do that and to stick to that decision.
Well, Beth, my mum's always said from a young age I'm very stubborn. She loves me, and she loves me for my stubbornness. But she's always said that. So I think part of me, it's a mentality in terms of, I feel like, I mean, she jokes when she says that, but it's something that actually a coach, an executive coach, once said to me, is that I have clarity, and I
Yeah.
think that clarity comes from, like I say, giving yourself time, and knowing who you are first and foremost. I don't think I've discovered everything about me, but that really does help. And so when someone, I really like the quote that you used, but at the same time, I would say this, that when I was making those decisions, it wasn't me deciding for myself on my own what it was I was going to do and whether I was going down the right path. I had my brothers, I had my mother around me, and I ran things past them. But the difference is, the partner was someone who, his whole life had been dedicated to making it to the top at PwC, and, retiring as a partner there. And that was all he knew. But my family knew me, and they
Yeah.
knew what makes me tick. They knew, and they still know what I love. They know when I'm taking on too much, or when I'm not taking on the things that I don't enjoy, that I enjoy. And it depends on who you go to for that counsel, and surrounding yourself with people who are well intentioned, people that know you and know what makes you happy and want your happiness. That makes a huge difference. So
Yeah.
having that support network around me, and people who work in the sort of the non-executive space or even the executive leadership space, having that support network around you is massive. And I'm really, really blessed to have that.
Yeah, I always call it your squad. It's like, who are the people you go to who know you well enough, who understand you, who know what, the path might look like for you as an individual versus the one that everyone expects, and what does bring you joy and what doesn't, and how might you make that happen, and using those people in your squad as a great way of helping to guide, but being also driven by your own desires and what you're really looking for versus what everyone else
Mm.
thinks for
Yeah,
themselves in their world.
yeah, exactly. And I think these are kind of things you have to constantly consider. Whatever it is you're doing, whether it's volunteer stuff or whether it's paid work, that's an element of your life and the reality of life. You need to get paid for what you're doing.
Yeah.
But whatever it is you are doing, it all comes back to that. And then for me, like I say, it comes back to that purpose and that intention. Ultimately, if you take it all the way back to the beginning, who am I and what is it I'm doing? Why am I doing it? That
Yeah.
if you do that, I feel like you will be really clear. You'll have the clarity as well.
And I think it's really interesting on your journey that you took that a bit of time out to really think about that, obviously with other things going on as well.
Mm.
Is that it's very, very easy to get stuck in the zone of being busy at work and not giving yourself the time and putting yourself and your thoughts on what you want to do in your career and all of those kind of questions at the bottom of your to-do list,
Mm.
versus somewhere where it can really make a difference and you can spend that time. Because although those questions sound easy because they're nice little short simple questions, it takes a lot of thinking to really understand who you are and what you're going to do and why you're doing it. It's not a simple answer to those questions.
No, and I think part of it is because of the pace at which the world goes. Part of it is because we come up with all sorts of crises. Like right now, we have a pandemic that nobody was expecting, and that has a massive impact in terms of just your day to day life, whether it's at home or whether it's at work. Everything's impacted, and there are outside forces that impact that. But actually, just even finding 5 minutes in your day to remind yourself or to give yourself that space to just contemplate. I think it's one of the things that people really struggle with actually is not having the noise, or not having a distraction, whether it's from our phones or whether it's from work or whether it's home based. Just actually having even 5 minutes to think about all of that has a massive impact, not in just in terms of your energies and your joy in life generally, to actually stop and think, but actually just reminding you of where it is you're trying to go in your life. I found even working in the city, everything was about racing. So it
Yeah.
was a fast pace of life. It was long hours. It was a healthy competition with your peers. You weren't sort of trying to jump over each other to get to the top, but there was a clear kind of competitiveness in terms of ratings and things like that, with your peers. So you're trying to race to get the best rating every year. But that in some ways that just reduces your ability to be attentive. And I think
Yeah.
back to the time when I was at PwC. Look, I absolutely loved it. I loved the clients I worked with. I loved the people I worked with, the teams that I led. Um, but I look back at it now and I go, I wouldn't want to go back into that because, um, that kind of sense of being aware of myself, what makes me happy, and when to pull myself out of something, actually, importantly, to step back. That wouldn't have come, I don't think, if I'd stayed within that environment because it was a very clear pathway and you go in one direction. It's a linear thing. And if you look at my career in life, it's been anything but linear. I've gone from one side of the picture to the other and then back over, and it's just, like I say, it's that sense of just slowing down, really understanding who you are and what you want in life. And that makes a huge difference to how you then see life and the perspective that you have.
Definitely. And I love the idea that it doesn't have to be a big sabbatical from work where you don't have to go and hug trees and find out who you are and kind of do that thinking, but 5 minutes a day, just giving yourself some attention, just giving
Yeah.
it just giving it some focus, and that can make a real difference. And I think we can all find 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
I'm sure 5 minutes, even if it's just as you wake up or before you go to bed, or, actually take 5 minutes for a lunch break and take a moment and consider these things. But that seems really achievable. And WorkJoy is all about making these things possible and achievable versus, you have to go on a retreat for 3 months and find yourself. Is that you already know yourself. You just need to pay yourself some attention, maybe.
Exactly. And it shouldn't take you having to go away for those 3 months to give that to yourself. It's like my mum's a counsellor, and constantly from a young age she'd be at us about, how can you have anything left when your bucket's just being filled and filled, and it's full to the top and it's overflowing, and actually giving yourself that time, the 5 minutes, like I say, to start off with, actually enables you to empty some of that's inside of you. Like I say, it gives you so much more clarity and focus, and I think that's something that I have now that I probably didn't have 10 years ago.
And it's giving yourself permission, isn't it, to give yourself that time? Because no one else is going to give you that time. You're going to have to find it for yourself.
But isn't that the biggest thing, Beth? Do we give ourselves permission for these things? Even I struggle with, even now, giving myself permission to say no to things, to say, actually, I don't think I can take this on, or actually, I really struggled with that, particularly at the start, in terms of people that would ask me to speak at events, or all things that I'm really passionate about. They'd ask me to get involved with, but I am human, right? I'm limited in resource, and actually giving yourself even permission to say, it's okay for me to not get involved with that, because then there's FOMO as well, right? There's that fear of missing out as well that hits you on the other side. So it's partly about your passion, but partly about FOMO. And if I say no to this, will I miss out on, this whole thing that's going to happen? And actually, that's okay. I think so much of this life is about what we see other people do, and therefore should we be doing that as well? But rather than looking that way round, I think we struggle sometimes to look inwards and face our real selves and what we want, and giving ourselves permission, as you say, to do that. I think it would just be an amazing experience for anyone that actually accepts everything that they see in the mirror when they look within.
Yeah. I heard a new one recently, which is JOMO, which is the opposite of FOMO, and it's the joy of missing out.
Yeah,
I love that. So So I think
a
we
bit of
all
that.
often get FOMO, but JOMO is a new one, and I quite like the idea of it.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's exactly what it's about.
So a couple of things before we finish off. First of all, just dig into it a little bit for me. I loved what you were saying about how sport kind of came the place where you felt accepted, and kind of, I got the sense that you felt you really belonged in sport. And is there anything that we can give advice-wise around, finding that place or space? And it might not be sport, for some people it might be other things, where you really feel like you belong, and how that can really influence what you do in life.
Yeah, I guess for me personally, it was a case of looking back and saying, looking back at what I'd gotten myself involved with, and obviously we get ourselves involved with all sorts of things, either at work or outside of work, at home. And for me, sport was the thing that was the constant in my life. So, some people like to go running. I don't run for no reason, as I say, that's awful English, but I don't run without a reason and a purpose. I'm always about purpose, as I say. So I can't just go out for a run, but I can play basketball all day long, and run up and down a court. So give me a ball and I'll be there. So I know what makes me tick down to that level. And I know what's going to give me joy and what's not going to, and I'm not going to fight myself when it comes to things that I don't enjoy. And I think just to step back and consider, first of all, the pace of life, the pace that you're going at, maybe slow down if you need to. Some people need to speed up. Look at the pace of your life, and is it where you want it to be? Look at where your passion lies, and you'll know that, because you'll remember looking back, you'll remember the moments that made you smile, or whether it's on your face or whether it's from within. And then look at what power you have in terms of, what can you influence in your own life, and what can you do right now that will make a difference and make a change in your life. So I think those kind of things really help towards finding what it is that will give you that sense of belonging. I think those things will automatically result in you realizing there might be 3 or 4 things, it might not be one, um, that you want to try out. For my mum, for example, it's artwork. She absolutely loves to paint and draw and do pottery and all this kind of stuff. So it could be anything, but that will give you the fire, it will give you the energy, and it will just bring you back to, I think, centering yourself.
Yeah, and I love that idea of like if you don't enjoy something, not giving yourself, like beating yourself up about it. Like there's so many things in their well-being, go and do yoga. But if you don't like doing yoga, you're not going to find the joy in it, and it's not going to help you. But if you do
Absolutely.
like doing pottery, or you do like doing sport, or I often say like playing the piano is my yoga because and my meditation, because I cannot think about anything else because I'm so bad at it other than just focusing on it. So yeah, I mean, you get better with time apparently, but it's been 30 years and I'm not sure I'm getting any better yet. But
Yeah.
but I love it, and I don't care that I'm not good at it,
Yeah.
because it's just really kind of all consuming. So finding that, whatever it is that gives you that space to think, or the team that makes you feel like you belong, or wherever it is, and you've probably already found them, but you might not be investing enough time in them. You might not actually have done it for a while. You might not have focused your attention there, and that time and space. And I like the idea of some people need to slow down, some people need to speed up. Whichever speed you're going at, is it right for you right now, and how can you make that work?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
I have, as to finish off with, some quick fire questions for you, if I can fire them at you. Give us your gut feel
Okay.
responses for these. Right. So the first one is, for you personally, what is always guaranteed to give you a little bit of work joy?
Anything that is sports related, it's going to make me happy.
Brilliant. So literally anything sports related, you will be there, happy getting into it.
Absolutely.
What book are you currently reading?
So it's probably a less well-known book called Reflections, by an author called Guy Eaton. So I'm a reflective person, as I say, and that's kind of reflecting on life and how the world works.
Brilliant. I might have to give that one a go. Question 3. What is the best or most useful bit of advice that you've had from someone that you always come back to?
Oh gosh, there's been so many. I think the one I would choose is actually a quote rather than me having met him in life. But there's a sort of I think he was a 13th century Muslim scholar and preacher called Maulana Rumi, and a lot of people might have heard of his poetry. But there's one particular part of a long poem that he's written. And in there it says, "Is it true?" He asked, in terms of what you say, "Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?" And I like to always come back to that.
Wow, that's such great advice, isn't it? And
Mm,
I've written that down and highlighted it to put on my wall somewhere, because I think that's a really great thing to consider. Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind?
yeah.
Great. Thinking about our audience now, what is one super practical bit of advice that you could give to our listeners? Something that they could go and do now, do tomorrow, do the next day, that would really help them with their own levels of work joy?
Yeah, I think coming back to what I was just saying earlier about starting with just those 5 minutes, um, or even 1 minute if you can't do five, because I know some people even struggle to give themselves permission to have five. So really think about your purpose and your intention in those minutes. It's not what you do every time you give yourself 5 minutes in a day, but it's what you start off with, and it's that reminder of why am I doing what I'm doing. Make that your brand, your personal brand, and your values will develop from there. And I think right now that will really lift you above not just where you are right now personally, but also above other people around you, because values tend to do that.
Great. And it's been fantastic talking to you and understanding your perspective and your journey, and how volunteering can lead to a joyful life, working where you really feel the passion. Where can people find out more about you, or get in touch with you if they've got questions or are interested to find out more?
Well, I always say the best way, and I say this with zero arrogance, is just to Google me. So if you Google Rimla Akhtar, then you'll see all sorts of connections on there. But Rim Gym Consulting is my sort of business, social business, and be more than happy to hear you on there. And I'm also on the usual socials, so check me out.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rimla, for joining us. It's been fantastic to hear from you, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you so much, Beth. It's been lovely to be on.
Thanks all for listening to my conversation there with Rimla. I was really inspired by some of her thinking, and the one thing that's really stuck with me are the 3 questions, which is the advice she always comes back to, which was, is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And for me, that's the message I'm taking away from this episode, is if we all were to stop for a minute and ask ourselves those questions about our actions, about our intentions, about what we're trying to do, I wonder if we'd all be in a slightly better place tomorrow than we were today. And 3 things, really simple things. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the WorkJoy Jam. Please do go and listen to other episodes, see which ones give you some inspiration, give you some things to take away. We would love to hear from you about what actions you're taking and what you're doing to create and cultivate some work joy in your own lives. So do let us know. We're on the Instagram at Create Workjoy. Tag us in something. We would love to hear from you. And also on LinkedIn at Create Workjoy as well. So do go and have a listen to some of the other episodes, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.